Before funk had a name, before Parliament Funkadelic became a cosmic empire, there was a woman whose voice helped shape the very sound of that movement. In the late 60s, George Clinton and Funkadelic was experimenting with raw and psychedelic soul. This woman emerged as one of the earliest female voices in P-Funk history. Her presence brought warmth, emotion, and power to that very sound that was still being invented. At a time where women in funk was often pushed into the background, she stood front, recording, performing, and helping define the foundation of what will become one of the most influential collectives in American music. Yet despite her contributions, her story has often been left out of the larger funk narrative. The centerpiece of today's video is all about Debbie Wright. Now, if you guys love my videos and love supporting me, then I suggest you become a member of the channel where I will be releasing exclusive videos just for you all. Be sure to get that family tier so you won't miss out on these exclusive perks. If you guys would love to connect with me outside of YouTube, then I am officially announcing that I am on Discord. Here, you can provide me with feedback on my recent uploads. You could drop your suggestions for future videos, or if you just want to chat it up about videos or about music in general, or just about anything, we could do it here. We could do it together. I hope to see you there. Now, before we start, let's be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and push that notification bell to be sure you won't miss out on any more content. Now, without further ado, let's cue that intro. Born on June 18, 1951 in Detroit, Michigan, Wright was born into a musical family. Her grandfather was the original bass singer for the gospel group The Flying Clouds of Detroit in the late 30s. Later on, he created a family group that was called the Family Julie B. Singers, which included her mother. In the late 60s, American music was beginning to shift. Soul was expanding, rock was getting louder, and psychedelia was pushing artists to experiment beyond the rules. Somewhere between gospel harmonies and distorted guitars, a new sound was forming that was raw, emotional, and unapologetically black. Wright was spotted singing alongside a jukebox track of Gladys Knight and the Pips at Detroit's legendary 20th Grand nightclub in 1968, when she was still a student at Philip J. Murray Wright High School. She was spotted by Fuzzy Haskins, Grady Thomas, and Ray Davis of the Parliaments. They were so impressed that they approached her and invited her to sing with them. Her first recording sections with George Clinton and Funkadelic was at Detroit's Gold World Recording Studio, and what resulted from this encounter was something magical. Along with Malia Franklin, they provided early backing vocals frequently without credit to Funkadelic songs. Later, she assisted Jeanette Washington in joining Parliament-Funkadelic collaboration. While most remember the man who stood front and center of the movement, few recognize the women who helped shape its earliest sound. Debbie Wright was one of the first voices. Wright came from a tradition rooted in church soul and rhythm and blues. Like many singers of her generation, her earliest musical education came from gospel harmonies, music that was built on emotion, power, and truth. Her voice carried warmth and clarity, but also strength. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't rely on gimmicks. It communicated with feeling that made it perfect for the experimental direction Funkadelic was about to take. As the late 60s funk scene began to shape the sound around Detroit and New Jersey, Wright found herself surrounded by musicians hungry to create something new, and with George Clinton began assimilating the earliest versions of Funkadelic, Debbie Wright became part of that creative circle. Funkadelic was never meant to be a traditional band. It was a collective of musicians, singers, thinkers, and free spirits, all contributing to one sound. Debbie became one of the earliest female vocalists associated with Funkadelic, lending her voice during the group's formative years. At a time when funk was aggressive and psychedelic, her vocals added balance, soul, melody, and emotional grounding. She wasn't a background ornament. She was part of the sound's foundation. In an era where female voices in funk was often marginalized, Wright stood shoulder to shoulder with male collaborators, contributing to recordings and performances that would later be recognized as groundbreaking. The funk movement, like much of the music industry, was dominated by men. Women was often pushed to supporting roles. Debbie's presence challenged that norm. She represented the voice of authentic soul within a sound that was becoming louder, stranger, and more experimental. Her contributions wasn't about spectacle. That was about feeling. George Clinton found a spin-off group in 1978 and called them Parliament. This group initially consisted of Wright and Jeanette Washington. Franklin later joined them, completing the trio. They released the group's debut album, Pleasure Principle. Wright particularly made significant contributions to this album. He contributed co-lead and background vocals throughout the album, in addition to singing lead on songs like Mr. Melody Man. During this time when the group's debut album was being recorded and they was promoting it, Wright started dealing with personal issues such as drug abuse and mental health issues. According to bandmates, she would occasionally appear paranoid during rehearsals. And during this time, mental health was something that wasn't really being looked at or taken serious. These difficulties was revealed by Wright herself, and it was also covered in the 2016 documentary titled Tear the Roof Off, the Untold Story of Parliament-Funkadelic. She eventually left Parliament in 1978 as a result of these problems, and she was replaced by Shirley Hayden. As Funkadelic grew in popularity, the collective evolved, lineups shift, and new personalities emerged. Larger-than-life characters took center stage, and in that expansion, early contributors like Debbie Wright was slowly being pushed into the background of the story. Her departure from the core spotlight wasn't unusual for the era. The music industry rarely preserved the full history of women, especially those who helped build movements before they became profitable. But absence from the spotlight does not mean absence from impact. Wright stopped performing professionally in 1978 after leaving Parliament-Funkadelic and Parliament. She would often talk about going through personal and mental health challenges during this time, which include mental health and drug abuse. Although Wright didn't go back to recording professionally, she would occasionally perform in local and religious settings. Sadly, on October 12, 2017, Wright passed away from a brain aneurysm at the age of 66. The soul of early P-Funk still carries the traces of her voice, which was emotional and rooted in tradition. Today, funk historians and P-Funk scholars increasingly recognize Debbie Wright as an essential early contributor to the movement. Her work helped bridge traditional soul vocals with experimental chaos that Funkadelic embraced. She represents the unsung women of funk, those who sang, recorded, toured, and inspired without receiving the credit that they deserve. Her legacy lives not in chart positions or album covers, but in the DNA of funk music itself. Every soulful harmony layered into psychedelic grooves owes something to pioneers like Debbie Wright. To tell the full story of P-Funk, you must look beyond the myths and the legends. You must listen to the voices that came before the costumes, before the spectacle, before the funk became a brand. Debbie Wright was one of those voices. Her story reminds us that funk was never about the wild imagery, or loud grooves. It was about soul, freedom, and expression. And without voices like hers, the funk revolution would never have found its heart. Now, before we go, I have a question for you all. What is your favorite song that Debbie Wright sang on?